Hello, how you doing? In 2023, I want to try doing something a little bit differently. Previously, I've done a lot of hit and run short form blogs on Instagram stories. Very superficial, not going into a hell of a lot of depth. In 23, I'd like to do more video content. It's going to hang around longer. It's going to have more depth involved into it, and hopefully I can explain concepts with more detail. The downside is it's going to take me longer to get it out, and it's going to be more irregular than it already is. So please just bear with me as I go through this. And also, as I will mention at the end of the video as well, I welcome your feedback. What can I do better, worse, indifferent? And I welcome your questions. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about training zones. What are they? How do we interpret them or understand them? And why are they important as well? So if we look here on the left, we have our FTP-based zones. This is a 7-zone model that we're looking at now. This was originally depicted by Coggan and colleagues in How to Train a Power Meter in the early 2000s. And as you can see, zone 1 is our recovery zone. Zone 6 and 7 is our anaerobic capacity zone. So it's pretty easy to understand. We start easy and we get hard. You can see that these are based around percentage of FTP. Now, there are a few problems with this. FTP for very highly trained athletes is a reasonably good predictor for various physiological events that I'll talk about briefly. For lesser trained athletes, it is less accurate at predicting various physiological events that I'll go into in a minute. So if we look at the middle column, we will see our polarized training zones. Now, by this stage in proceedings, we've probably all heard about polarized training in at least some capacity. Some of us are writing theses about it. So zone 1, if we look at the bottom of the middle chart, is our low intensity training zone. It is demarcated by staying below lactate threshold 1. So just remember that for a minute, because we are going to come back to that in the future. Between there, we have zone 2, which would, in a polarized model, would be called threshold. That is between lactate threshold 1 and lactate threshold 2. And above that, zone 3, high intensity, above lactate threshold 2. Now, first things first, I can see how this gets confusing to a lot of people. So on one hand, in polarized training, we tell people to avoid zone 2, while at the same time telling people that they need to accumulate a lot of kilometers in their legs at a low intensity, which in a 6 or 7 zone model, we would call zone 2, the endurance zone. So even me as an academic, I have a tendency to say zone 2 and chill, which is actually technically speaking incorrect, or at least not incorrect, it can be confusing. Now, the second point is, how do we actually determine individually what our training thresholds are? Now, the first one is obviously come into a lab. We can prick and poke and make you breathe into a mask, and we can find out all these fascinating things about what's going on with you physiologically. Not everyone has access to that. I work for a university, and even I have to massage people to get into a lab some days. So some simple ways of understanding where, if we're looking at a 3-zone model, zone 1, 2, and 3 lie. Zone 1 sounds cliche. It's below about 120 or 130 beats per minute. We can easily hold a conversation, and we feel like we can hold that pace all day. You will know when you get to zone 3, because sometimes we interchangeably use the term ventatory thresholds in place of lactate thresholds. It's not perfect and it's not ideal language, but it does correlate quite closely together. So you will know when you're out running or riding or swimming or whatever, you will feel a point where your ventilation almost feels like it flicks a switch, where all of a sudden you go from just breathing to, okay, now I'm actually really working. That is typically around about ventatory threshold 2 or lactate threshold 2. Again, it's not perfect, it's a field test, but it's a way to get to these training zones. So now that we understand that, I thought I'll come over here and have a look at this. So this particular article here is an article by Sam Milan and Brooks. Sam Milan coaches Pogacar, among other people. So he is a coach of Tour de France winning cyclists. So here we have a data set. The top graph A here is elite level cyclists. B is moderately trained or recreational, so you, me, everyone, unless there's anyone elite watching this, which would be nice. And below that, someone with metabolic syndrome. So I'm not going to touch too much on this. I just think it's good that he's put that there so we can see an extreme example, so we can see the extreme ends from untrained to highly trained. So what you'll see here, if we look at the top graph, if we look at these colored in diamonds here, we can see blood lactate on this bottom line here. Power down the bottom, blood lactate down the left-hand side. So we can see this is our lactate concentrations as power increases. This top line is our fat oxidation rate. So this is how much fat we are using as energy, that we are burning as energy. So we are sparing glucose while we're doing this. Now, this particular data set is based around elite athletes. 2 millimoles of lactate. So remember I said, remember lactate threshold 1, okay? That is the top end of our first training zone. We demarcate that at 2 millimoles of lactate. For this data set here, that occurs at about 270 watts. So I think we all agree that 270 watts is highly, highly trained. This is world-class, Tour de France winning stuff. Lactate threshold 2, we demarcate as 4 millimoles of lactate. So you can see here, that's knocking on the door of 350 watts, okay? Now, what we can also see here is with the fat oxidation rates. This particular athlete can get to about 250 watts before that fat oxidation starts to ramp down, and you would see it on another graph, the glucose, or the carbohydrate, I should say, oxidation rate, with the Krebs cycle and lactate and all that stuff from our first year anatomy that you just really don't want me to talk about right now, that starts to go up. So for this particular athlete, or this group of athletes here, we can see they have spent a long time developing this area down here. So they can sit on 250 watts for, you guessed it, 4 to 5 hours, which is probably about the average stage length that these guys work with on grand tours. Now, if we look at the middle chart here, I've seen this many, many times in the lab, okay? These are your match play athletes, your recreationally trained. Forgive me for saying this, your CrossFitters, okay? Match play, netball, rugby, whatever, okay? We can see here that lactate increases very, very quickly, and fat oxidation decreases very quickly. So this is the kind of athlete that is going to be coming off the field, coming off the track, whatever. They're going to be looking for Gatorade. They're going to be looking for gels to replenish that energy that they've lost very, very quickly. Also, we can see here that zone 1 will be below 150 watts. Zone 2 is very, very narrow. And by 200 watts, they're in zone 3. They're going, by 200 watts, they're going full gas, okay? So, remembering what we know about training zones, have a think about our recreational athlete here. How would we best train them? What I would be suggesting, and I don't like to talk in absolutes, but what I would be suggesting is we need to develop that oxidative capacity down here. So that here needs to be developed so this top end can be spared, so it can be left for when it's really needed. That's where our polarized training models start to get applied very, very effectively, is in this example here. Now, this example here of our elite level athletes, you can see that they have spent a long time working in here, and I dare say they are avoiding this zone here as much as possible, and they're working on that real top end capacity here. Now, that's about all I had to say for today. I hope you got something from today's video. Like I said, in 23, I'm going to try and do more of these videos and going into a lot more depth than what I previously have. They're going to take me more time to get out. I know this is cliche, but please comment, hit the like or the heart or whatever it is, or whatever platform that I end up uploading this content on, and make sure you tag or share it with your friends. The only way this content is going to grow and prosper, and forgive me for saying this, the only way I'm ever going to get a chance to monetize on this and actually bring more content to you is if you share it with your friends. Anyway, please let me know what you like, what you dislike, what you'd like to see more of, what you'd like to see less of, and I'll see you in the comments section. Cheers. Thanks, guys. Peace out.